Hello, everyone. Welcome to the new seminar hosted by the Arab Society for Conflict Studies, focusing on the critical issue of accountability for former regime figures in Syria. I am Dr. Ibrahim Frehat, Professor of Conflict Resolution and founding president of the Arab Society for Conflict Studies. In the aftermath of war, dictatorship, or mass atrocity, societies are often left with a haunting question. Should those who orchestrated repression and violence be held accountable? Or should the past be buried in the name of peace? Transitional justice, particularly the pursuit of accountability for figures of former regimes, sits at the explosive crossroad of memory and politics. Some argue that trials and truth commissions offer closure and legitimacy for new governments. Others warn they risk reigniting conflict, destabilizing fragile peace, or devolving into victor's justice. But can a nation ever truly move forward without confronting the crimes of its past? And who decides what justice looks like when the very architects of yesterday's horrors still walk free or sit in the parliament? Accountability is not just about punishment, it's about creating the foundations for a just, peaceful, and democratic society. Without it, the wounds of the past can fester, and the promise of a better future remains fragile. It's with great privilege that we welcome Professor Roman David, an esteemed voice in the field of transitional justice, to lead us in exploring one of the most urgent and complex questions facing Syria's future. How can genuine accountability be achieved in the wake of unimaginable suffering? Roman David is a professor of political sociology at Lenin University in Hong Kong. Professor David held positions at various universities, including Newcastle, Yale, Oxford, and Harvard. He's an expert in the area of transitional justice and author of Lustration and Transitional Justice. Welcome, Professor Roman David, and thank you for your time. It's great pleasure to have this discussion with you on Syria. How do we define, let me start with asking you, what do we mean by accountability in the context of transition, post-conflict transition, and with regards to former regime figures? How do we understand it? How do we define it?
Thank you, Ibrahim, for the invitation and for your kind words. Okay, so how we define accountability? So accountability, we could say, means holding those regime figures responsible for their acts and omissions. Yeah, so responsibility is the kind of underlying notion of accountability. But if we want to explore it, we would really need to go a little bit deeper, a little bit be more analytical.
Yes.
So let's start with something which we can call legal accountability.
Okay.
Means holding those regime figures accountable for the violations of laws. So the criterion of accountability is law in this type of situations. The second type of accountability would be accountability for human rights violations, or for gross human rights violations in particular. Means holding these regime figures, as you call them, accountable for acts or omissions that resulted in gross human rights violations, even in those situations in which they may recall certain legal protection, such as we followed orders, or we adhere to laws which were designed to violate gross human rights violations.
Yes.
So we were just following laws and orders, and in this sense, we try to extinguish our accountability for this. So the criterion here is international law, international humanitarian law, and human rights.
So I'm sorry to interrupt. So the debate here is the problem with the laws that were during the former regime, or in the implementation of those who implemented these laws?
So we obviously need to go to include laws of the regime, because the regime had certain laws and they undoubtedly were abused. But then there were also situations, especially in the military, and where the soldiers said that we followed orders. And obviously, this is a big issue in the literature on transitional justice, to what extent we would listen to this type of excuses. And the criterion of judging this type of situation is already kind of established in international criminal law since Nuremberg trials. But then there's a third type of accountability, if I may continue in this. And this is accountability for misconduct in public office. So holding those regime figures responsible for a variety of acts related to performance in public office, which may range from corruption to deprivation of access to public services, and other forms of exclusions which these officials may have done. And the criterion for establishing this accountability is maybe law, but also there might be some other ethical codes in public service and other directives which govern public service in general, or illustration law, which might be approved to do this. And then there is a political accountability as a kind of a fourth type of accountability, in which we hold the figures of the previous regime accountable for bad decisions, let's say, as officials, as in any other country. But not only for bad decisions, but also for deliberately making those bad decisions, like spreading particular misinformation, ideology, propaganda. And obviously, this is also important because every regime is trying to justify why it is in power. And so it is important to hold public officials also accountable for this type of actions, such as in denazification of Germany. One of the third pillar was trying to getting rid of the symbols of Nazism. So the criterion here for judging that is democratic norms. So, for example, to what extent these people were spreading misinformation, intolerance, and this type of thing. So that would be.
Thank you. That's very informative, and I appreciate the differentiations between the different levels here of what we really mean by accountability and what level it's practiced. Now, generally, when we talk about accountability, the general impression, the public impression, it means it refers to like prosecution and punishment and trials and executions in other cases. Does that what we refer to accountability? Is it about punitive justice? Is about what forms of accountability can be practiced in this case?
So there might be various, ways, various consequences attached to this process of holding former regime figures accountable.
Hmm.
And they would differ based on the kind of I mentioned these four levels or types of accountability. So in case of legal accountability, it would be investigations, prosecutions, criminal
Yeah.
trials, and punishments, which are available in that particular society, available in laws of that particular society. Then there is accountability for gross human rights violations,
Yeah.
and this also obviously means prosecutions. But the standard is applying, of international criminal law or international humanitarian law, and this can be done domestically as well as internationally.
Yeah.
This could be done with the help of international jurists establishing a special court like the Special Tribunal for Lebanon, which was empowered by the International Criminal Court to investigate the assassination of Rafik Hariri.
Yes.
And so this is this kind of a different type of application, and we need those type of applications
Yeah.
precisely because the criminal justice system, the laws of the day, which were valid during the Assad regime, they may not
Yes.
they were not really fully legitimate. Yeah.
Yeah.
So human rights violations occurred in spite of the fact that law was in place. So that was really kind of a fiction of a law. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Did,
then there's accountability for misconduct in public office, and the consequences here could be, for example, lustration as a kind of a measure of justice, administrative justice. Sometimes it's called or personal administrative justice in the state administration, where people are being held accountable for decisions they did or their participation in decisions their departments made during those times. And then there's a political accountability, which is also pursued by illustration, but there might be other measures, just simple elections would,
yeah. Exactly.
take care of this, and illustration is a means of personal discontinuity. So it's just trying to say that, things just don't go as they were before. So there's certain consequences to bad political decisions. People
Yeah.
need to go. Yeah.
Yeah. Roman, there is always the debate also about the local versus international prosecution. Like we know cases like Charles Taylor, Slobodan Milosevic, even Omar al-Bashir, who were tried on the international level. Omar al-Bashir did not go for it, but there was a warrant issued on that level. So, who decides whether it's the direction? Is it local or international? And in the case of Syria, I mean, can this be done internally, or there should be some international? Do you think?
I think the utility of national versus international trials is it's a dilemma per se. Yeah. So
Exactly.
you think about uh, in doing international type of justice in those cases when the domestic justice is by some due to some issues neutralized. Yeah.
Yes.
So, for example, in Sierra Leone, there was an amnesty granted to the rebels, and they didn't agree with this. They didn't follow that offer.
Yes.
and suddenly the domestic space for prosecutions was exhausted. And so the government um, initiated themselves. I mean, there should be some international criminal court established in Cambodia, and it was established some kind of on this kind of hybrid basis, mixing national and in international components. So obviously, every country is a sovereign country. So I mean, the decision rests with the government.
Within the country itself, yes. And in the case of inability then of the country itself to conduct these trials, then some sort of an international level can be explored. Now, the very big question always countries in transition phase with dealing with the concept of accountability, who should be held accountable? Like in the case, and usually countries don't get it right, like on this level. Like in the case of Iraq after 2003, there was the de-Baathification that erased the entire regime from public office. It's the same case with Libya, with laws also that were instituted after the collapse of the Gaddafi regime. In Yemen, there was no accountability whatsoever, just an amnesty for everyone. Even in Lebanon, there wasn't also accountability to anyone. So, in the case of Syria and in general, who should be accountable? Are we talking about the Assad regime in its entirety, Assad and the people around him? Everyone was working in the former regime, the security personnel, military. Does that extend also, as in the case of Libya, to other areas of media and even education and other cases? Where do we draw the line? Who should be accountable? Is it Assad himself or more than that? And where do we draw the line?
Okay, so let's start with the criminal accountability.
Yeah.
So there are generally two answers to this question, and both answers are legitimate. So the first answer is everybody who violated law or violated international criminal law or human rights standards should be prosecuted. So
Yeah.
that's kind of a, very universalistic kind of deontological position, as we say in academia. It's imperative that injustice happen, justice needs to be done.
Yes.
So from this position, there is no compromise. Half justice or partial justice is still injustice.
Yes.
This is a kind of a default position in international criminal law, in any criminal law actually, and it is frequently demanded by victims groups or activists, and pursued by the state. Now, the other position is more pragmatic, more kind of consequentialist in its nature,
Yes.
and it argues that prosecution should be selective, and based on assessing possible consequences, of that prosecutions.
Yes.
So there's two very legitimate angles, and scholars who belong to that one group criticize the other one, and vice versa. So universalists criticize the consequentialists by saying that means cannot justify the ends.
Yes.
And then consequentialists claim that universalists want to pursue justice even if the sky falls. So we have two very legitimate angle on this. Now,
and pragmatism is at the heart of it also, of the heart of the debate.
and then in transitional justice, scholars try to invoke Max Weber, like a Jose Zalaket, try to invoke Max Weber and transpose this dilemma into a different dilemma. Transpose it into dilemma of ethics of conviction and ethics of responsibility.
Yes,
When
very.
you transpose it in this way, then it's a different type of
Yes.
dilemma. So
Yeah.
if you have it ethics of conviction, it says that you really prosecute anybody who should be prosecuted because of the certain
Yeah.
principles. But on the other hand, it is very very difficult to do, and so that kind of ethics of responsibility, because you don't want to jeopardize the fact that the regime is just very fragile,
Yes.
and by prosecuting and pushing too much maybe to the corner, maybe it's not that useful.
Yeah.
So, but then they are practical. These are on the kind of a theoretical level. But then you're asking, who should be prosecuted? Whether it
Exactly.
should be, people in the military and or security.
Yeah.
The thing is that obviously the scale of violations
Yeah.
is enormous, is
Exactly.
large, and if you think about that kind of a universalistic perspective, it would take decades to prosecute, even if a country has a functioning judicial system. And
Yes.
you have all those professional judges, and everybody works diligently and fast, and that would take really a very long time. And
Yes.
in addition to this, there are various, logistical difficulties. Where would you find, uh,
Judges. And
qualified lawyers, advocates, judges, impartial judges,
yeah.
and
In the case of
how much
Rwanda,
would it cost?
as of the yes, as in the case of Rwanda, when they found like thousands and thousands of people, and who's going to try them? Where are you going to find those judges who they're going to do that?
Yeah, exactly. And Cambodia was the same, even worse situation. Now
Yeah.
imagine that the government decides, oh, there will be prosecutions, yeah,
Yes.
and then so there's a bad guy. Everybody knows this is a bad guy of
Yes.
the regime, and he goes to face trial. But then what happened is, let's say, evidence has been destroyed,
Exactly.
and so there are two possible outcomes of this.
Yeah.
None of them is good.
Yeah.
If he's prosecuted and walks free,
Yes.
from the court, people will
Yeah.
think that the new regime is covering up for the old regime.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if he's prosecuted and punished, people will think that this is a travesty of justice. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
so this is a very difficult situation. Yeah.
Yes.
And so what social science is trying to do is, give some kind of a guidance about, what people want, what people,
Yeah.
how people see it. And, so sometimes you hear those, if people start prosecuting in a country, the top leadership, yeah.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
then you immediately have somebody who is complaining, some groups or political parties complaining, but the worst injustices were committed by those people at the grassroots.
True. True.
Okay. So then well, let's go and persecute, and if in other society we learn from this mistake, we persecute people at the grassroots, and then they
Yes.
say, no, just you're just catching up the small fish. Yeah.
Oh,
The big
that's true.
are intact. So it's a kind of a dilemma, and in social science, there were fascinating experiments done by Gibson in South Africa, and
Yes.
it shows that what people want is that to prosecute leaders rather than the
The small.
followers.
Hmm.
They also demand more prosecution on the part of the atrocities committed by the government than by the opposition. This is always, when you have a civil war, then something also happen, maybe a very small amount, maybe it's defensive, but
Yeah.
then they say, but you need to prosecute that one as well.
Mm.
So people want to have government.
Yes.
And then they don't distinguish much between the kind of a top echelon of the political and the military apparatus.
Yeah, thank you. This is very helpful, and I think for the case of Syria, Libya, Iraq, offer with de-Baathification and the political isolation laws in Libya offer an important lesson here because both experiences failed actually on that level when they went for applying accountability to everyone. It's on a massive scale. And also Yemen and Lebanon with the amnesty approach that basically did not hold anyone accountable. In Lebanon, warlords, they just changed their uniform and sat in the parliament without holding anyone accountable for the civil war in Lebanon. Also, the experiences did not go well either. But maybe the experience of Tunisia, actually, that took a whole different approach from the four countries, can offer some lessons to Syria here, where it's not either or, it's not going to the extreme, either total punishment or total amnesty. It's more they investigated those who were directly linked to violations in the past, like certain number of important regime figures from the former regime that were investigated, almost 100 people, like in the case of Tunisia. Of course, we know in Syria it's a much bigger scale, but the approach in terms of establishing a transitional justice law first, and then in Tunisia, and then in investigating those in number of individuals with the direct link to violations might offer an approach here or some lessons to Syria is to consider in this case. Um, yeah. So then the question, Roman, is about the question of how helpful this is, honestly, for that the successful of a transition. Because also here we're always faced, as you just said, two debates or two different valid views, whether in applying accountability for the principle of peace and justice to prevail and proceed peacefully, or in the case of prosecution of former regime, then you're triggering, the former regime to regroup and a counter revolution, and then slide back into violence. And by the way, in Libya, some of the, as you know, you're an expert on Libya, that also triggered some former regime elements to regroup and fight back, more of a counter revolution. So, in your opinion, how important this is for a peaceful transition in Syria is applying the accountability, and how do we balance not this is taking us back to more of violence, as we know that some has already started in places like Latakia and Tartus, and in the case of Syria. Is it really helpful, and how do we balance it?
So there are various levels of doing justice and various scales, as you rightly pointed out, to
Yeah,
who should be affected.
yeah,
And I mentioned we were talking until now about this type of a criminal law and criminal accountability.
yeah,
But then there is another layer, and this is that kind of a layer of officials. I mean, people holding public office, people in, let's say, bureaucracy or in any other area of the state apparatus. And this is precisely what you mentioned about when you are talking about the political isolation law in Libya or the Ba'athification law in Iraq. And there are obviously problems and dilemmas with them. And so let me just a little bit unpack those problems
Please.
and
Yes.
dilemmas. Yeah. So first, we need to look at state apparatus as a spoils of those of the previous regime. So offices in the previous administration may have been distributed to loyalists of the regime, people who might be entirely unqualified to hold
Yes.
those offices. So, I mean, this type of people obviously should be dismissed from public office based on the lack of qualification. But
Yes.
then the second thing is that let's assume that the people who are in that offices are qualified, but then their record is tainted. Their
Yeah.
past is problematic because their departments, if they not personally, maybe they were aware or they participated in gross human rights violations. Did they, the question is, did they provide, political backing to the regime? Did they had unfair practices, or even they may have been involved in corruption? Yeah. So
Yes.
there are various issues of that nature, and so obviously this type of people, they may be working to subvert the government. Yeah, so
I see. Yeah.
that's an issue of they are capable usually, and they are working on the other side of the
Yeah.
aisle. It's not an aisle. I mean, it's a big gap. Yeah,
Yes.
as democracy within democracy, but this is regime change. And
Yes.
then the third is that uh, um, that some people may be just they might be qualified and they may not have even any record of being politically affiliated,
Yes.
but they might be perceived by the public that they are the same people. And so the question is, we can thinking about their commitment to the previous regime. And then you can see that this is a little bit already a kind of a gray zone
Yes.
category. It's
Yeah.
kind of a more about perceptions rather than their own actions. So
Evident.
the question which the new regime, new elite has to address to what extent they have sufficient workforce to mobilize to replace
Yes.
the other people, and what are you don't necessarily need to be people who are professionally qualified to have their position, but they have the education qualification to hold a position, so they can learn in for working. So somebody nobody may be qualified to be, I don't know, working in I don't know, department of education or department of I don't know, agriculture or this type of things. But
Yeah.
if somebody has a qualification degree, and the people can learn this type of thing. So you are having a dilemma of loyal prospects or loyal amateurs, we can
Yes.
even say, or disloyal professionals.
Yes.
And so you just need to think about how to balance it. Yeah, but again, what is important to consider is to consider the positive and negative impacts of those decisions or their absence. So
Exactly.
first thing is uh, what to do in this type of transitional situation. Obviously, first thing is to fill up the positions with people who previously were excluded from
Yeah.
those positions. So there might be people who were fired because they didn't perform that kind of a servant role in the Assad regime, and they refused, or for some other reasons they were excluded. Or
Yeah.
they tried to get a position, because they were qualified to have it, but they were never having that opportunity. So this thing is not only the kind of administrative issue per se,
Yeah.
but it also is a marker of justice.
Exactly.
It's a minimal justice of the fact that somebody who was previously excluded can be now included, and those who benefited unfairly are out. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then it's the security dimension, the security dilemma is obviously complicated. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you leave people who are loyal to the previous regime working in the administration, they may be actively working in fomenting violence and doing working still for the previous regime,
Yeah.
and in many countries this type of thing is
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
So they use the tools of the state apparatus,
Mm.
to continue essentially they work. On
Yeah.
the other hand, totally neutralizing the state apparatus, would result in very, in the situations then the operation of the state is affected. The state collapse.
Yes.
It's not only that, that I'm not talking about the army and the armed forces and which were disbanded, but then think about the issues that there are a lot of governmental services needs to be delivered. Yeah, the state is a very important tool of society in many aspects. So it's important to deliver services for people, and people would like to have those. So it's a big dilemma. Where what the
Yeah.
security is,
Yeah.
and it really needs to be appreciated both sides of the coin before the leader make the decision. About it.
Exactly. Would you recommend, Roman, amnesty for Syria? Is this something? And also, let's keep in mind that violations occurred actually from both sides during the war, not just from the regime itself, but also from the other side, the opposition.
Mm.
And how do you evaluate the concept of amnesty in this case? Possibly not amnesty for everyone, but at least for some, and especially also given that, again, we're talking here about both sides that committed violations during the war.
Mhm, mhm. So generally, amnesty may have very profound stabilizing effect on transition.
Mhm.
Uh,
Uh,
amnesty
Algeria did it, by the way. The amnesty granted amnesty during the 90s as a stabilizing force, as you said.
Yeah, yeah. So they have been involved in the eras of in the aftermath of civil wars, like in the United States. When the
Yeah,
civil war begins with amnesty, but also in many wars in Europe, amnesties and oblivion kind of were kind of declared.
yeah,
We forget what happened, um, and it's important, signal to you know to the some kind of a to society,
yeah.
to the opposition, suggesting that there is a place for everyone in the new system.
Mm, mm.
And so what the prosecutions and illustration may do is they effectively may perpetuate the divisions of the past.
Yeah,
So they cannot really conserve those divisions. So they continue.
yes,
So
yeah.
that it needs to be uh, done something with those amnesties in a way that they are not really full,
Yeah.
full cream amnesties,
And not
kind of a
affecting the principle of justice also.
skin, yes, exactly, skin milk amnesties. And by
Yeah,
this, I would, try to look at what is amnesties actually doing, yeah, in society.
exactly. Exactly.
Amnesties are giving a second chance
Oh,
to
yes.
people. And so uh, if amnesty were to be declared, uh, the new regime should make most out of it
Yeah.
and make most out of this second chance, so that they doesn't need to follow,
Yeah.
doesn't need to face
Yeah. Yeah.
an issue of third chance. Yeah,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
there's
But
nothing like this.
yeah, but not for everyone, I guess, right?
Yeah, yeah. So what I'm trying to say that, it depends, for what type of
Yeah.
officials within the regime, what kind of level this could be defined by law.
Yeah.
But the kind of a smart amnesty or the kind of a conditional amnesty
Like
could
that.
be
Mm.
declared, in which that amnesty is not, given to everyone just because of, they want to have a peace, and then this is kind
Exactly.
of a very lazy way
Yeah.
of the conflict.
Yes.
What about if the new government says you need to deserve your amnesty,
Yeah, okay, okay.
and
Like maybe, Roman, maybe linking it to public service, as in the case of Rwanda, for certain people and within the former regime, when they
so
do give back to the community. Is this something like the Rwanda experience, maybe?
So yeah, so it could be as you said, that in this case of Rwanda, it also in a little bit in Poland, something like that
Exactly. Yes.
was implemented. So basically, what it could do is um, that certain people, which you would think, who could this be? Maybe certain servants at certain levels are given opportunity to apply for an amnesty.
Yes.
And
Okay.
but then the condition of this application is you tell us what you did.
Ah,
In
nice. Yes. Yes.
you tell us, you know, kind of you submit an affidavit,
Yes.
and uh, then you tell us about what you did in the past, and then
Yeah.
um, uh, people could then cross-examine those affidavits when they come together. I
Mm.
suppose there could be various evaluation. Maybe artificial intelligence can
Yeah.
help to with all
Yeah.
those submissions,
Yeah.
and then the veracity of this affidavits could be then um, established. And
Exactly.
then what would be two scenarios? So if person is truthful, but was involved in the regime, or say, I was working in the regime, and I'm my department, we were involved in this type of bad activities. Um, then to make amnesty effective, you need to give amnesty for those activities. You need to
Yeah. Yeah.
say that this is true. But there are some situations that people would say, no, no, nothing like this I did, in the past. And you,
And no,
when
I'm
you
just a problem. Mm.
you held them accountable for this kind of they perjured themselves, yeah, for accountable for perjury. And
Yes.
so they submitted a false statement, and they
Yeah.
should be accountable. Now, beauty of this, the additional beauty
Yeah.
of this thing is that not only that these people should be, for example, dismissed from the state apparatus, but they could be prosecuted,
Exactly.
um, and not only prosecuted, on something that they did in the past, something that was related to something forgotten, very difficult to establish situation, but
Yeah.
for present lying, for present dishonesty. And
Yeah.
this is a different type of issue. So you transfer that kind of a problem of the past to the problem of the present,
Exactly.
This effectively, you can think about this, that this is a kind of a, you incentivize with the amnesty
Yeah.
for people to go forward. You give them this loyalty test. If they pass it, if they are willing to play by the by the
By the
rules
amnesty
of,
rules. Yes.
then they are, it's fine. But if they are not going to play by the rules of the new regime, then they need to face consequences.
Yeah, thank you. There is the new government in Syria did something like, as in Iraq, a very controversial move, which is dissolving the army, which again in Iraq was realized that was a huge mistake by the U.S. administration, Paul Bremer at the time. We're seeing this now also being done in Syria. The new government in Syria has dissolved the army. How alarming is this? Are we talking about a similar case as in Iraq? Is it something like probably the Syrian government, the new Syrian government should have avoided dissolving the army? Because also this is closely linked to accountability and the like the political isolation or the de-Baathification on that level. What's your opinion on the new Syrian government dissolving the army there,
I think this is a
and how
uh,
helpful this is? Mm.
very risky decision. Um, I am not really kind of a strongly uh, supporting or opposing it,
Yeah,
but I just try to unpack the kind of the ramifications. So of course there's a security risk of not having these people in the administration, and there's a security risk of having these people in the
yeah,
administration. So if you know if the peoples are out, they can strike back.
exactly.
They are in. They have the tools of the disposal. So
And
I'm
they're trained also. They're trained also.
they're trained. That's exactly. So the thing is that um, what could what could be in place is a mechanisms of building the new army already. Yeah? So
Mm,
literally
mm.
thinking, how these uh, lower ranks, we cannot really think about any officers, but kind of
Yeah,
the lower ranks could be incorporated into the new army. So again, some kind of a you know qualified amnesty for some of those lower level uh,
exactly.
people could be a possibility. And the point is of doing it. It's not that being that we need them. Maybe I don't know to what extent there are so many factions in Syria, and then so many uh, armed forces and people. I believe may
Yes.
have this kind of idea that we don't need them at all. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
The point is not whether we need them or not. The point is to not to let them to regroup.
oh
Uh,
yeah, yeah,
so the thing is it's better to have the some people who see that it was a wrong to be there. Um, so especially young, new recruits, they were not there, through the whole regime. They were kind of born into that kind of a situation, or grew up in that type of a situation. They didn't have really the full choices.
yes,
So this type of young people, young soldiers, they can be integrated. It's better to take them from the gray zone uh, in to make them, with
yeah,
a kind of a bite, rather than push them to the black. Yeah.
yes,
Uh,
exactly, exactly.
so it's again to incentivize them, and to to isolate them. Yeah. And then to join. I mean, it's a it's an employment. It's a prospect for career. There's
Yeah,
something in it for them. if they are somewhere about to fight in, I don't know, Latakia or somewhere, I mean, it's very difficult to have, what is the end game there for them? I mean,
Yeah,
this is bound to lose, you know.
yeah, yeah. Great. My final question, thank you, Roman. You're an expert on the illustration and accountability, and you studied this in many countries, in East Europe, in Asia, in the Middle East. So you've done extensive research on this in many other countries. What these countries can tell Syria? What lessons do they offer for Syria? What things that Syria should take from, from those countries that they went through the experience, you think?
I think you can clearly see, that there are paradigmatic, cases.
Yeah,
Libya, where we have the collapse of the state there.
yeah,
So we just um, it's the political isolation law was, I think, one of those um, not really um, smartly designed
yeah,
measures of justice.
yeah,
You have Iraq, you have the Ba'athification, dissolution of entities, as you mentioned.
yes,
Uh, and again, it's interesting to think about, what the consequences could be. Yeah. So um, the the time is an essence. You don't want them to regroup. When the Iraqi army was dissolved, there was not much happening really. If you remember that,
yeah,
that era was allowed.
yeah,
But then there was a time and they regrouped, and then about 1 year later only,
yes,
after the pacification, it started. So
yeah,
we need to think. You need to think about this type of uh, um, time as an essence.
yeah,
Um, Ukraine teaches us that it is very important to uh, try to conduct these processes legally, because some of those European standards, for example, of lustration, they're very high. I think the threshold is unreasonably high, and simply, the thing that you want to build, if you want to build democracy, it's, we are starting from the point of, kind of a revolutionary overthrow.
yeah,
And having this type of, being in this type of situation where lives are at stake, I think, the fact that some decisions are made,
mm,
in order to protect the democracy is the fragile system. Of course, we are not talking about democracy yet, but uh, it's very reasonable. It's
yeah,
also very reasonable to the territorial integrity. So it's not really easy for new governments anywhere. They face a lot of domestic and international scrutiny.
yes,
Um, Doing something, what is possible is just, you know, invite those Libya experts, invite those Iraqi experts,
yeah,
invite those people from Ukraine, and just ask, to share their experiences, with this type
mm,
of processes.
yeah,
People who went really through it, yeah, people, academics who experience this. I think this is very important, because everybody can bring to the table the kind of a local experiences, the knowledge of local expertise is a great thing. Yeah.
oh,
So
very important. Mm,
you have a neighboring Iraq, and it's very easy to ask people there who just went through all this painful 20 years, and see what lessons they can offer.
yeah. Yeah, I thank you for emphasizing actually the local expertise on this because, yes, understanding the local context and the familiarity with the cases, this is particularly important. Roman, thank you so much. I really appreciate this great discussion with you, that you highlighted many, many important points for us on how to deal with this very, very debatable concept of accountability in a post-conflict society and in a transitional phase, in a fragile peace or a fragile transition that's moving forward. I learned from your insights on this, so I'm grateful for that. And thank you very much. And I hope we will continue this discussion with you in the future. I'm sure, there will be many other opportunities where we can discuss and collaborate on these important subjects. So thank you again for your time and your thoughts and your insights on this.
Thank you, Ibrahim. Yeah, it was my pleasure.